best way to live my life. So yesterday, if you guys went to Mass, you guys heard the gospel reading, and the gospel reading was from Matthew chapter 5. And in that, Jesus says that you are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In a similar way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who's in heaven. And I know that you guys are very aware, just like I was at your age, that the world has a lot of darkness in it, right? So I've gotten to see that in a deep way in my lifetime. I've gotten to go to third world countries, the Dominican Republic, Nicaragua, and see the true poverty that the world has. I've gotten to go to Afghanistan, as Father Jay said. I suffered a lot when I was in Ranger School. I lost 20 pounds in the first 3 weeks because you basically get starved and don't get to sleep while you're there. Cold water sprayed in your face while they make you work out at all hours of the night. And so I really got to experience this dark suffering and just see the world and the darkness that's out there. And this charge that we have from Jesus to be the light of the world is nothing light, right? It's nothing simple. It's nothing to be taken lightly. And I think that one thing that the young people of our church, I think, very often or don't get enough is an opportunity to really choose your faith for yourself. So you guys all are going to grow up, and you're going to have this opportunity over the coming years where, sure, somebody might be forcing you to come here tonight. Somebody might force you to go to Catholic school. Somebody might be forcing you to go to Mass on Sundays. But at some point in your life, you're going to have to decide for yourself whether or not you're going to choose to live your Catholic faith. And it's going to be the most important decision, I believe, that you're going to make in your entire life. And the choice is whether or not you're going to be that light in the world. Because the truth is that no matter what you decide, you're either going to be contributing to the light of the world or to the darkness of the world. You're either going to be adding to the goodness or to the bad. And so that's what this comes down to, this idea of virtue and vice, But you have to really intentionally, prepare yourself for that decision point that you're going to hit in your life, where you have to decide, am I going to embrace this and live this life, or am I not? How many people here know what lukewarmness is? So you guys are pretty aware. So lukewarmness is basically like, it's not hot or it's cold, it's kind of just in the middle, right? It's something that's, it's kind of like Goldilocks, right? Like it's just kind of just right, but it's really just right for the devil when it comes to your spiritual life. God does not want us to be lukewarm. It's the worst thing that we can be in our spiritual lives is lukewarm. And a lot of us, unfortunately, are raised in Catholic homes or we're exposed to other Catholics who are lukewarm in their faith. And so a lot of times that can be very unappealing to us as we're growing up because it's like, why should I want to do this? Why do I want to suffer and sacrifice and live by these rules that the church has created when all I see is these lukewarm Catholics in my life? The best way for you to get lukewarm, like if you want a room temperature water bottle, right? You leave it out in the room. It's the environment that something's in that's going to create the temperature for it. The beautiful thing about your life and the beautiful thing about being a human being is that you get to decide what you're going to be when you grow up. You get to decide who you're going to be when you grow up. That's the difference. You don't have to be defined. You will undoubtedly be affected and formed and shaped in a lot of ways by the environment that you're in, but you don't have to let that define what you're going to be. You don't have to let your parents' faith life define your faith life. What your grandparents did is not what you have to do. Whatever your friends are doing is not what you have to do. You get to decide for you what you want to be, who you want to be. And so I think that's really important to understand that you have to make that choice. So you have to actively avoid that lukewarmness. And so how do we do that? So we have this need for virtue and this need for greatness in the world, right? You guys all know that. You guys can see people that you know that are struggling with depression, anxiety, and just difficulty in their lives, right? Everybody that you know is going through something, through some sort of challenge. And you get to determine for you, are you going to be somebody that they can look to as an example? Are you going to be somebody that they can rely on, they can count on in their lives to be there for them and to be strong and to be loving and understanding? Or are you going to be somebody that people can't count on? Somebody that people are constantly have to worry about. If you think about your parents, are you the type of son or daughter that your parents have to constantly stress or worry about you and worry about what you're doing with your time? Or are you the type of child that is actively bringing your parents closer to God through your example? You're somebody that is challenging them just through who you are to be a better person. In my own life, I got to experience that. I became Catholic when I was 13. I started going to Mass every weekend when I could drive. Before that, I would even have my parents drop me off sometimes, and I would go by myself. But over the time, my mom saw that I was really serious about it. And when I was 17, I got to be her confirmation sponsor. She became Catholic. And then a few years later, her best friend and her 2 kids became Catholic. And I got to be a couple of their sponsors as well. And so you guys really have this incredible power and this incredible influence that you probably don't realize and you're probably not fully using yet. But you get to decide what you're going to do with that. And you get to decide whether you're going to pursue the virtue or the vice in your life. And so virtue is just this tendency towards the good, right? Virtue means that you have this inclination to do what is right. When you approach a situation and you know right from wrong, virtue is what gives you the habit of doing the right thing in those situations. And, we talked about superheroes tonight. One of my favorite superheroes is Captain America. If you come to my office at Dynamic Catholic, I have a lot of Captain America stuff. Naturally, right? I was in the Army, so I'm a big Captain America fan. It kind of makes sense. But the cool thing about Captain America is that Captain America was just a normal human that basically got enhanced, right? And I've always loved the analogy of that's what God's grace can do for us, right? God's grace can take you in as this frail and scrawny boy, he was scared, he was just a weak little guy, and he went to that chamber, and he got completely transformed as a whole new person on the other side of that. And that's what you embracing your Catholic faith, that's what you embracing a daily prayer life, and really engaging in Mass on Sunday can do for your life. And you can be transformed and be that person. You can be that hero that can lead others, to a better life, to a better way. And it's amazing. The best thing that you can give to people in your life is hope. It's one of the best things that you can give. And us, as a generation, I don't come talking to you as somebody who I think that I'm old and you're young. I kind of look at it in our spiritual generation as people. I'm kind of like a senior in high school. You guys are like the freshmen. We're in this fight together. We're currently, facing the battle that we face. And that I'm telling you today that the church needs you to be the best that you can be. And that if you don't embrace that, if you don't embrace your faith, if you don't embrace who God's calling you to be and be willing to make those sacrifices to grow and change, to love deeply and to allow God's mercy to work in your life and transform you, whatever you're called to do, whatever you were created for is going to go undone in your lifetime. Or it's going to have to be picked up by your brothers and sisters who are out there with me, with Father Jay, with the people who are the core leaders here tonight, with Lindsay, out there on the fight, trying to do the work that God has laid out for us. And so the work has to be done. And we see this world in this dark and ugly place, and the struggles and the pain that people are going through, and we have the ability to do something about that. But we really have to embrace our character and what we were created for in order to do that. And I had, when I was growing up, I'm the youngest of my dad's 7 kids. And my dad has 7 kids by 5 different women. And so throughout my life, I really got to see the pain of what it looks like when somebody doesn't embrace that responsibility. When somebody doesn't take ownership of the consequences of their actions. My dad, when I was really your age, so I was about 10 to 14, 15, my dad cheated on my mom while I was growing up. And so I got to see him, for months at a time, leave our family and go stay with another family. And I got to experience the pain of allowing vice and sin to really dictate you and who you were going to be. Because my dad didn't embrace that responsibility that he had to me as a father, or that he had to my mom as her husband. And so you can really experience that pain on a deep level, and I'm sure that all of you have in some way or another. Experience the pain of other people's sins, other people allowing vice and this lack of virtue to really dictate who they are. And that's the beautiful thing about when you embrace the life of virtue, and you embrace the cross that Jesus and God the Father have prepared for you, is that through that discipline and through the hard work that you have to do to develop that discipline and develop that virtue in your life, you actually become more free. You become more yourself, and there's a ton of fruits that will come from that. And some of the fruits that come from a life of virtue and a life of holiness, are the things that are the fruits of the Holy Spirit, right? So joy, peace, patience, and just the ability to take on life's challenges in a whole new way. I've done a lot of training in my life in the military, and I had so many people come up to me during that. And, I just remember one story specifically where I was in the Florida swamps, and we're in the Florida swamps wading through, and it's a long movement. We hadn't slept in 2.5 days. We're hungry. Everything's wet, right? And I don't know if you've ever been where everything's wet, and you know that there's no going home, there's no going back to a building that night, but you're just so wet, you're cold, we're hungry, and then there's a lightning storm. And usually they don't make you get in the water when there's a lightning storm, because people actually died in Florida a year and a half earlier than that because of being struck by lightning. So typically you don't get in the water with a lightning storm, especially not with metal guns, right? That's not a good look. So we're in the middle of it though, and the lightning starts, so there's nothing we can do except for push through to the other side. And we're singing songs, I'm being silly, trying to make the other guys laugh, because I'm like, there's nothing we can do about it but to go forward, right? We have no choice. But moments like that in my life, my ability to do that really came from me developing that strong relationship with God and me allowing him to work in my heart and in my mind to form me to be the kind of leader who, despite the circumstances in my life, despite the hardships that I'm facing, can rally other people around me and lead them to the other side. And I knew when I was your age that was what I wanted to become. And it was at your age that I decided to start that journey to become that man. It wasn't when I was 21 or 22. It was when I was 13 that I decided this is who I want to become, and this is where I'm going to start pushing my life towards. I want to be a great Catholic man. I didn't want to be average. I didn't want to be lukewarm. I wanted to be great. And that's where it began. And then it led me through all these experiences. And as I did things like that, more and more people started to notice. And they would say, hey, something's different about this guy. And they would start to ask me questions. And I got to have a lot of great faith questions or faith conversations with people because of those experiences and because of my ability to keep things, to be joyful, not just happy based on the circumstances that I was in, but actually joyful, a deep-seated joy that allowed me to experience life on a whole nother level. And so lastly, I just want to talk about the need for living an undivided life. So we talked about not being lukewarm, right? You embracing your faith and you embracing that side of you, you have to full on embrace it. There can't be, on Friday and Saturday night, you're a different version of you than you are on Sunday morning. I did that for years as I was in high school. And I'm telling you that it did not work, right? I was the guy who would bring the liquor to the parties and would rally everybody to do all the bad things on the weekend, and then I tried to wake my friends up on Sunday morning to go to Mass. It didn't really make sense, but at the time I didn't really have the guidance to understand the deep lie that I was kind of living while trying to live on both sides of the world like that. And so finally I said, you know what, as I continued to pursue closer and closer to Jesus in my own life, I started to realize how much these things were not just things that my religion teacher was telling me not to do, right? Like when it came to chastity or drinking or things like that. They were not just things that my religion teacher or, old annoying people that I didn't like were telling me not to do. It was something that actually was keeping me away from the Lord in my life. It was something that was keeping me away from that joy and that peace. And was giving me more anxiety and stress. And I was becoming more and more like my father, like my older brother, so I didn't want to be like. And so finally I was like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And it took me years. It took me years and a lot of failure and a lot of trial and error. And you have to get back up and keep trying, and keep pushing forward. Surrounding yourself with good friends and good people who can guide you along the way. Because it's going to be hard. It's going to be the hardest thing you can choose to do in your life is to try to be a Catholic saint. There's really nothing harder than that. I've done some hard stuff in my days. I'm telling you that one of the hardest things I've ever had to do sometimes is go back to confession. All the starving and staying up late, running in the mountains, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do sometimes is go back to confession. Because it's really hard to live a great Catholic life. But nothing in this world has a greater reward for you in this life or in the next life than living a great Catholic life. And I promise you that. So with that, that's all I've got for tonight.